Hi, it's Karen James here. It's November the 30th, 2021. I just attended the Canadian Center for Substance Abuse um, conference last week on the Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And so I had to actually to comment on it because I was so impacted by it. So first of all, I'd like to identify myself as a person of lived experience of addiction. So I used drugs and alcohol for 21 years of my life. Also grew up in a family that was addicted, and so both my parents were addicted to alcohol. And my father left when I was 5, and my mother struggled with alcohol addiction all of her life and died when I was 18, just turning 19. And growing up with that addiction in the family was very traumatic for me. It affected me very personally, and as a result, I feel like I grew up without much of a childhood and became addicted in my family, and then went through my own addiction for about 21 years, and then I went to recovery, entered recovery for that, and through a long process, eventually recovered from my own addiction. Ended up with a mental health issue, as I believe very related to my addiction, and then struggled with recovering from that for quite a long time. So that's the background I'm going to give you as to why I'm weighing in on this. And also worked in the addiction field for 27 years. I left the addiction field, and I think that's pertinent to mention as well, predominantly because I was disillusioned by what eventually happened in the addiction field and what I saw that was not working. And generally, I saw the direction of the addiction field moving farther and farther away from treating addiction, and it became like an almost apathetic response to addiction. And I felt that the government had a lot to do with that, that they were moving away from actually treating addiction, and kind of moving towards this apathetic response of, well, let's just manage it, not even manage it, just let's just support addiction, and then sort of let people live in their addiction, and really not do much else. Perhaps we'll try to make sure they don't die of addiction, but that's the most that we're going to do about addiction. We're not really going to bother treating it anymore, and that's one of the reasons I left, because it was a very apathetic attitude, I thought, and there seemed to be no way to fight that. More and more, that was the direction that the treatment of addiction was going in. It wasn't going to go to treatment anymore. And some of what I saw, and I'll identify this very clearly, because this is clearly what I saw the direction to be. There was an anti-stigma campaign, and I think the anti-stigma campaign was really hiding the truth of what was really going on. And it looked like a wonderful anti-stigma campaign because, it looked like it was really trying to do something important for people with addiction, taking away the stigma that was attached to it. Because the stigma really affected people getting treatment for addiction, or people being able to seek help, or people just generally trying to get medical help, or seeking help at emergency, or just the attitudes against addiction, which are really horrible. People are treated terrible. I've been in emergency with people who have addiction. I've seen the treatment, so I know it's horrific. You can't get help for people. Doctors and hospitals treat people in a horrible manner. It's unbelievable. I've been there, and I've fought in all sorts of places with clients of mine, and seen the deplorable response that they get from medical personnel. It's unbelievable. I mean, it is truly shocking. I've never seen anything quite like it. It is unbelievable, truly unbelievable. Animals are treated better than people with addiction, quite honestly, and it's shocking, and it's painful, and it's deplorable, and every one of those things. So when you hear anti-stigma campaign, you think this is really good. This is going to make a difference. Except the anti-stigma campaign was not what it appeared to be, in my opinion. I think the anti-stigma campaign was cloaking something else that was much more sinister than we'd actually could imagine. So the campaign focused on language. And the language was, let's take away the word addiction, because that's the word that has the stigma attached to it. And we change it to something that's not stigmatizing. So the idea was that we would call it a substance use disorder, or a substance use issue, so it doesn't sound as bad. Now, I'm going to tell you what that actually did. And it wasn't what we thought it was doing. And I think it was really hiding the truth of what the government and the CCSA was really advocating for, that it was going to change the idea of addiction into something that would actually take away the need to treat it. Okay. That's what they were really doing. And so once it became a substance use disorder, or a substance use issue, it was no longer addiction. Addiction carries with it a particular definition. By definition, if you are addicted, it means that you don't have a choice. Because if you're addicted, you can't really stop yourself because you are in fact addicted. It means that you have a problem that you can't really stop yourself because you're addicted. And I'm going to tell you something that when I was prior to my recovery, when I was using, I could not stop. I couldn't stop for a day. I tried many times. I couldn't make it to lunch because I had to use. I was addicted. That's a fact. I was addicted. I couldn't stop. I had to go into a hospital where they kept me locked on the floor that I was on for a long enough period of time until I was safe enough that I could actually leave the floor and go outside safely, because otherwise I would have used. I was unable to stop on my own. That's why I went into that hospital, because I didn't know how to stop, and my cravings and need to use were so strong that I couldn't stop myself. I had to be medically detoxed because I couldn't stop safely. That was a fact. So I was in fact addicted. There isn't any other word that describes where I was with my addiction. And as it is for many people, they become addicted. There's a withdrawal, and the withdrawal is painful, and it's not something you can just stop with. You need help to do that. And so that's the facts. People are addicted. They're not choosing at that point. The drug actually has a hold on them, both psychologically and physically. And so that's a reality. By changing it to substance use, they can then say people are just making a choice. And so they can simply not make that choice. And so that's a whole different ballgame. Once it becomes a choice, then you can say, well, people are making a choice, and we can give them the right to make that choice. And we have no right to tell them they can't make that choice. And the minute you do that, it changes the nature of the game completely. Now you don't have to treat it anymore. Now you don't have to insist that people get treatment because they're making a choice. And what right have we got to tell them to make a different choice? What right have we got to do anything? So we should actually support their choices, shouldn't we? And if they are saying they want to use drugs and that's what they're telling us, then we have to respect that choice, don't we? And then that brings in the harm reduction movement, which completely supports that. So we should actually be supporting their use. And we should go that route instead of the treatment route. So the treatment route is unfair, and harm reduction is much fairer approach because that supports their choice. So that's the shift that they were doing without anybody realizing what they're really up to. And I think there's the truth. And I think it was very well cloaked under the anti-stigma campaign. And I think that's really tricky and really sneaky that was being done. So this is what has actually happened. So now we're in an environment where harm reduction is the choice of treatment for addiction now. Oh, excuse me, for substance use disorders. So people can be supported in their choices. And now we don't have to treat people. So we avoid that expense, right? We don't really have to treat people. We can just support their choices. And then you have places that like the Recovery Ottawa methadone clinics where you can go and you can also, not only can you get your methadone, but you can also get Dilaudid, you can get amphetamines, and you can get benzodiazepines. So they cover pretty much the complete array of drugs that people would like to be using, uppers, downers, and opiates. So you can get your drugs covered. But what the harm reduction people don't seem to realize is that the addict wants more than that. They actually want everything they can get their hands on and at any quantity. So it's never going to be enough. And so they're going to go still buy drugs on the street. You can't give them enough quantity to make them happy. That's the reality, because they want more. And as an addict, I'm more than well aware of that. So you wouldn't be able to give me enough drugs when I was actively using to satisfy me. So I would take the drugs that you were going to give me, and then I'd go and buy some more on the streets, because that's just the facts. That's what we would do when we are addicted. That's a fact. Now, harm reduction people don't get that. They don't, because they're not addicts. And those that are not going to admit to that fact. They're just not. They're not going to go in there and be honest enough with you to tell you that reality, because that's just not what they're going to do. It's not part of the philosophy of that whole orientation to admit to that reality. And those people that are using aren't going to admit to it either, because we don't want to let that out of the bag, do we? That would, actually probably tell people more than we want them to know. I have nothing to lose by telling you that, so I'm going to tell you that. That's exactly what I would do. I would get your drugs, all that you're planning on giving me, and then I'd go out and get more, because that's what I would do as an addicted person. And that's the thing that they're not going to admit to you, or they don't know about it, or they're not aware. So I'll come back to the conference. So I attend the conference, and I note that there's some sort of group called the Canadian Association of People Using Drugs, and they're going to speak at the conference. And I thought, they're experts on people using drugs. And I thought, well, that's interesting. So I'm going to go check this out. And so this woman is speaking. She's under the influence, clearly, because I could tell she was under the influence. And she's speaking on behalf of people using drugs. And apparently a couple of the people from her association are dead. Like that were leaders in that group. Well, why? Because they were using drugs, obviously, and they died. How enchanting is that? So she's talking on, them being consulted as experts on people using drugs. Well, you know what? I use drugs. I think I could be consulted. I'm in recovery now. My mind's pretty clear. I'd probably give you a more honest answer than someone who's currently using drugs, because they have more to lie about than I do. I'm not going to lie to you. And I'm not putting them down by saying that. That's just what we do when we're using drugs. I'm not going to give you the truth, because that might endanger my ability to get stuff from you. I'm going to tell you what I need to tell you to get what I want from you. I'm sorry, but that's the facts. And that's not like, this is the hard part. I'm going to tell you that, and you're going to think I'm being unfair. No, I'm not. I'm just being real. It's just reality. And if you don't think the person that was presenting is being dishonest, then, you're a fool, unfortunately. And like I said, I'm not doing that to be, rude about the person. I'm just being honest about addiction. When you're in the midst of your addiction, you're going to tell anyone anything possibly that they want to hear from you in order to ensure your supply of drugs, and possibly get more of anything that's going to, ensure that supply, and maybe even increase it. That's a fact. It's just it is. And any addict, any person that's been addicted, any person that is currently addicted, that's the facts. That's just reality. And anybody telling you different is just not telling you the truth. I'm sorry about that. That's just a fact. If you think they suddenly get honest because you're giving them a platform, you're a fool. You're an absolute fool if you believe that. Ask anybody in recovery, and they're going to tell you the truth. So you bring this person in, and what are they doing? They're asking for all this stuff from you, that you're going to pay for their transportation, pay for their hotel rooms, and then they want a special room that they can use in, and they don't want any medical personnel there. Why? Because you're going to dampen their buzz. You're going to dampen their buzz. They don't want somebody, watching over them, because they just want to get high. They just want to have a good time. You have this crazy notion that their use is, it's all this, they're doing it because it's, they're saying, oh, what we need to feel well. No, what they need to feel high. They're giving you all the responses. You're teaching them how to do that. And they're learning, because they're going to learn to give you the right answers to get what they need. And then they're asking for, can we have the new types of cookers for their heroin? And I'm thinking, oh, for God's sake, are you serious? Are you serious? This is really going on at a conference, that you have opiate addicts asking for specific cookers in a special room where they can use, and you need to provide this for me if you're going to invite me to your conference to speak as an expert, as a person using drugs. Ask people in recovery. We all use drugs. We can tell you anything you need to know. Come on, people. Why are you not asking people in recovery? Why are you having a person stand there who's currently using, who's currently under the influence, to give you this kind of stuff? You've given them a platform. I mean, it's an insult to every single person who struggled in their recovery to get well, that you've given a platform to somebody who's currently using. It's an insult, absolute insult. It's an insult to every child that was ever raised in a family where their parents were using. It's an insult to us to do that. Like, it's horrible. I can't even imagine. When I saw and listened to that, I was just appalled that any center that represents itself as somebody advocating for treatment or whatever, for addiction, could possibly put that person in a conference talking. And then you're going to stand there and say you're progressive and you're caring, and you'll probably look at me as being archaic and unfair. Like, you're so twisted that you actually see that as being fair and representative. You're not being fair and representative. You are playing a flipping game. Two of the people on that person's association were dead. We're dead, for God's sake. That's what you are supporting. You're supporting this apathetic thing where the people that you've given voice to are going to die. That's what you're doing. You're supporting an apathetic reality of people that are going to die because you think this is okay. What you think is okay is it's cheaper. It's cheaper to support their addiction and allow them to die of it than it is to try and find ways to treat their addiction and give them a better life. I mean, it was one of the reasons I left the addiction treatment world, because this is what it was coming to. This is what it was coming to. One day you'll just, give them you'll just put them under, because you'll see that as kinder. Let's just euthanasia all of the flipping addicts, because that'll be a kinder thing to do. I mean, I'm not kidding you. People, you're like, it's so sickening. I sat there and listened to that. And then when I challenged the woman on the fact that not one bit of negative, aspects of addiction were being presented in her discussion of what all she wanted to be the expert on people using drugs. And I never mentioned anything about who, I mentioned my parents and addiction and losing my child and my addiction. Never once did I mention what that addiction was. And she automatically assumed it was alcohol. And isn't that interesting? She never once mentioned that it could have been opiates. And yet, opiates are no kinder to children than any other drug. People using opiates haven't been any kinder to their children than any other persons using drugs. I mean, take a look at the history. I mean, when you nod off on your opiates and you have a baby, do you think you treat that baby any differently? There are horror stories, one after another, about children of people using opiates who have suffered immensely, who have not been cared for, fed, nothing, because someone's using opiates. Let's be realistic. There's no drug user. There's no particular drug that makes anybody nicer than the next. So when we're talking about addiction, nobody's addiction is nicer than the next addiction. It doesn't produce niceness. And that's a fact. So what are we talking about here? You know, and when we see that, that's a beautiful example of, my addiction's not as bad as yours. I mean, unbelievable, and that got said. And then the head of CCSA, tells this woman how courageous she is for sharing that. No, she's not courageous. She's under the influence. I was always courageous under the influence. You don't have any courage when you're on drugs. You can do anything on drugs. Where's the courage there? The courage is, can you do that? Courage is go into recovery and stop using drugs and then do that. I mean, like I said, to everyone that's in recovery, to every one of us that decided to stop using and change our lives and go down that struggle of recovery, that's courage. That's courage. That woman hasn't got courage. She's about to take you for everything she can get from you. And she represented that in her presentation, in what she was asking for. I mean, I've gone to presentations as a lived experience person, and I've spoken at presentations. I did not get my hotel paid for. I did not get my transportation paid for. I did not get any remuneration for what I did. Nothing. Zip. And she's there asking for everything, and she'll get it. She'll get it. You'll pay her all that stuff. Unbelievably so. For why? And for why? Because she's using drugs? Is that the reason you're going to do that? And you will, because that's going to support your platform, the platform of not treating people with addiction. And the other thing you don't do is you don't present any of those horrible things that happen as a result of addiction. You're going to hide those in the closet. Not that anybody's not aware of them. And I said, one thing I didn't see at that conference that's not represented at all, nowhere, it's the children. Where's the voice of the children? Where is the voice of the children whose lives are destroyed by addiction? Because I'll tell you, I've seen them. I've seen those kids. I worked with a 13-year-old kid. Actually, she's a friend of mine's daughter. And I met her when she was 13. First time I saw her, she was 4. And I said, oh my God, she's going to be so damaged because her mother drank through the pregnancy. And then her dad came to me when she was 13 and said, would you speak to my daughter? I said, sure, I'll speak to her. And by the way, she's given me permission to speak about her, and he has as well. And I thought, oh, it's going to be bad. And I met her, and it was remarkable. She was mentally really together. Well, her intellect was preserved, and her maturation was stunning. And she was way beyond her years, 13 going on 30. And 2 weeks later, her mother died of her alcoholism. And it was tragic. It was tragic. And she showed me a picture of herself when she was 7. And she's got a circle of bears around her. And she's reading the big book to them. So she used to have 12-step meetings with her bears at 7 years of age. And her life is the life of a child in a family of addiction. And it's tragic, absolutely tragic. That's how she had to be raised. Her mother's boyfriend used to take her to school, but he'd drop off at the dealer's place first with her. So can you just imagine? Like, you have no idea, where's her voice? Where's her voice? Where's her childhood is gone? There's no childhood there whatsoever. She witnessed violence. She witnessed all sorts of stuff she should have never seen. Way beyond her years, and then loses her mom at a time when she actually needed her. She's going in through her puberty years and her mother's dead. She says to me, I don't hate my mom, I hate the addiction. At 14. How many of those kids are out there? Their voice wasn't at that conference because, of course, we're not going to talk about that, are we? We're not. We're going to talk about the courage of the person that's under the influence. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. We're going to glorify the drug use and say, geez, how great these people are that are using. Like, how did our world get so turned upside down? You know, and I'm not saying that I would vilify these people because I was one of them. I say we need to treat them. What is wrong with us? My life got 100% better when I went to treatment and turned my life around and changed it. I became a caring person. I helped people. I became a productive member of society. I did things. I contributed to the world that I'm in. That's what you want to do. What do we need? A whole bunch of people who are going to do what? Do you think they're going to have a job? You think they're going to function in society? Do you think their neighborhoods are going to be really happy that they're living there? Because they're not. Do you think they just stay quietly in their houses while they're using? Do you think they make good neighbors? Do you think they make good parents? Do you think they make good family members while they're using? Because I can guarantee you they don't. And are they living in your neighborhood? That's the other thing. When I look at these people, they have no clue what it's like to live in a neighborhood of people using drugs. It's not pleasant. The profanity that's yelled all over the streets, the risk for children, you know, all the programs you have to run in order to manage the fallout of having active using people walking around because they don't think about anybody but themselves. And that's just what people do when they're addicted. They're not concerned about anyone else. They don't care. They don't care what they do. They don't care if they throw the garbage around. They don't care what they have no concern about anyone else. They're only concerned about themselves. They're unable to think about anyone but themselves. And so the fallout from that is really ugly. It's unfortunate. It comes with the addiction. Addiction doesn't make anyone nice. It just doesn't. You know, that those are the factors that you don't take into consideration. Well, they'll show up at your whatever, you know, and to get what they want, and they'll be really nice when they're trying to get something from you. And that's the end of that. So you might see them in that light, but you don't want them living next door to you. And most of these people that are the do-gooders and trying to get them their drugs, they're not living next door to them. They're not living in the same neighborhoods, and they wouldn't want to. They just wouldn't want to because they wouldn't manage it very well. And that's why they can be so sympathetic and supportive of it, because they don't have to live with it. And so it's fine for them. I live in an active drug addicted neighborhood. I see it all the time. And it's quite ugly, it's quite ugly. You just have to see it to believe it. I mean, it's like chaos. And that's how they live. They live in chaos. If they rent a place, they absolutely destroy it because that's what they do. And then, we'd like to help them, but we can't. So then I still work a little bit in the addiction field, not a lot, but just a little bit. And then I have to deal with like mothers who have to and I have to tell them, you just have to let go. There aren't any services. We can't help anybody anymore because it's now a choice. See, that's what they've done. They've made it a choice. And so we can't help anybody anymore. There's nothing we can do. So until they make a choice to do something else, we can't help them. And so as a result of that, there's nothing we can do. And so I have to tell like people to just give up, just give up and, grieve the loss of your family member because there's nothing we can do. We can't do anything to help them. And we can, because it's enabled, and they're not going to make any other choices. This is the choice they're making. And so they're likely going to continue to do what they're doing until they die. They're just, I'm sorry, but we can't help them. There's nothing we can do to help them, unfortunately. This is it. And they just, their family members like a runaway train, man. They're chaos everywhere they go. When the family member doesn't know what to do, and they're struggling because they don't want to lose that person. They don't want them to die, but they can't keep them in their lives because they're a runaway train. They're going to destroy everything they can in that family member's life. And although they don't want to let go because they're terrified the person will die, but holding on to them means their life will be destroyed. And there's absolutely nothing they can do to get them help, because they have to make a choice now to get the help. And unfortunately, they can't make a choice because they're not well enough to make a choice. And so now you just have to go, oh, well, so I guess they're going to die. So you're just going to have to grieve them and let them go. And just shut the door and cut them off and say goodbye. And for a mother to have to do that to their child, that's a pretty painful thing to do. So that's the world we're in right now. We're in the world where, we just have to accept that, if you have an addicted family member, this government of this country is going to support their addiction or encourage their addiction. So you'll never get them any help to stop their addiction. And since it's now a choice, not something that they're addicted to. They're not addicted anymore. They're just making a choice. So, until they can make another choice, there's absolutely nothing you can do to help them. So you'll just have to, give up and walk away. That's the current world we're in. And that's fully supported by the Canadian Center for Substance Abuse. And it's fully supported by the government. And that's how we deal with addiction today. We just we've all agreed now that it's choice. It's not a chronic illness. It's people aren't addicted anymore. They're just making a choice, and so may as well just supply the drugs that they need, and there's the answer to the problem. So here we go. We've got it all solved. And so we'll give them a platform. They can go and talk at conferences about, their need to use to feel well. And that's important. And we should just all support that. And at the end of the day, we're doing the best that we can. And all I can say is, God help us all, and the people that are doing this, shame on you. Shame on you for doing this. And I hope somewhere, sometime, someplace, you're going to face some measure of guilt for doing this. And that you one day face some sort of answer that you have to answer for this. That one day you'll have to answer for this, The other one I'll just mention is like, where do they end up, right? So some of these people end up in this housing system that is offered to people who are substance users. Yeah, substance users. So some of the housing, like I'm familiar with the John Howard housing system, and that would be worth taking the camera in and actually photographing, especially just after checks have come out. And to go in and photograph those places, because you'd almost think you were in a different country if you did that. They're so deplorably disgusting as far as filth and dirt and just absolute animalistic behavior. And it's just appalling. It would be like absolutely shocking to go in and take a look at that. And that's also considered acceptable. Like I said, I once asked for somebody I knew that was working there. I said, "So would you take your dog there?" And she said, "No." And I thought, like, how can you work in a place where people are housed, where you said you wouldn't take your dog? And I find that appalling. I find that absolutely appalling that you would leave people in situations like that and think that's in some way, I don't know, acceptable, or that's okay. We'd have people in places where you wouldn't take your dog, and we consider that compassionate, acceptable. I don't know, but that's a fact. That's where these people are staying. It's disgusting, and someone would, be interested to go and take a camera in there. I mean, this whole system of the addiction or substance use is just appalling. It is appalling what is going on, and I don't know anybody will ever shine a light on it. But I hope that one day we do. I mean, I think we'll be looking at something that's, years from now, we'll be looking back and just shaking our head and going, what were we thinking? What were we thinking? Who the heaven's name ever thought any of this was acceptable? Who thought that this was, you know, okay? Because it can't be. It just can't be. These are people, for God's sake. These are human beings. How in heaven's name do we think any of this is acceptable? I was addicted. I'm not today. Being free from drugs and alcohol, it was a gift. I'm so grateful that when I came to get well, at least there was some attempt to get people well. I mean, it wasn't ideal, but at least there was a focus on getting people well. Now, it's like, oh, well, we don't need to do that anymore. Why bother? Honest to God, what is wrong with us? You know? Anyways, I had to share this because having listened to that person speak at the conference, I mean, I just thought, what is wrong with this system? I'm shocked. I'm just shocked, and I needed to share it. So hopefully other people, have some sense of this is not okay. I hope you would think that giving a platform to actively using addicted people who can make demands about how much they expect to be given, to be experts, consulted, is somewhat disturbing. I just hope that there are people out there that would think that's somewhat disturbing. Anyways, I just needed to give voice to that. So thank you. I hope that people might give some comments and thoughts on this. I hope I'm not the only one out here that thinks there's something wrong with the system that's looking at drug abuse. Thanks.